that's when I said, well, I would need at least, at very minimum, if I did all the work and found somewhere really cheap, I would need at least $10,000 to $15,000 to get this thing going. Maybe 10,000, And I said, I don't know, even 5,000 if I could just get the doors open, right? But anyways, she said, okay, well, can you meet me at this Chinese restaurant on 46 Wednesday? You and your wife can come. We'll catch up and we'll get it squared away. What? So anyways, we meet, and the first thing she does is she prays, and she prays for me, and she says, Kyle, I know what God's about to do, and he showed it to me. You may not believe what I'm saying, but you will succeed in this endeavor because it's what God wants for you. And I was like, oh, okay. So anyways, she hands me 2 envelopes full of cash for the exact amount that I needed to open this business, right? No, I'm sorry, I take that back. It wasn't the exact amount. It's a little bit short of what I needed technically to open it up, but it was still a lot as cash, right? And I said, well, I haven't even talked to an attorney or not. Like, do you have like a contract or something I can look at? Like, we have to sign something. She said, no. Why would I need a contract? This is through God. She's like, I'm just obeying what God told me to do, and God holds the contract. She said, the only thing I want from you, Kyle, is when you're able to pay me back, only when you're able to pay me back and not any sooner, to pay me back the amount that I gave you and nothing more. I don't want 1 penny more because I am doing what God is telling me to do. So she did. She gave me this money with no contrast, nothing. It was just here you go, do your thing. I don't need to know the details. I'm not going to check up on you. I'll know when it happens. And then my father-in-law, he heard about this. I came to his house right after that. And he said, well, how much more do you need to complete this? And I said, a few thousand more. And I said, but I'll figure it out. If it's God's way, I know it'll work. He said, I got a credit card. We'll make it happen. And he's a penny pincher. He don't spend money on nothing. So just that belief that he had in what was going on was incredible. So, a couple months goes by, I get really discouraged because I couldn't find a place anywhere. Nothing felt right. I looked at everywhere. I looked at all the busy locations, right? The perfect hot spots for a place like this. And nothing seemed right. It didn't feel right. Maybe the price was all right, but it just didn't feel good to me. And I about gave up. I was actually calling her to tell her, hey, I'm going to bring you your money back. It's not working. And then this guy calls out of nowhere that I had tried to contact about a month prior and said, hey, I do have properties, commercial properties, but I don't have any available right now. He said, I do have a residential property that's in Crothersville, and they don't zone there. So you can put a business there, but you'd have to do a lot of work to this place. Like, you'd have to renovate the whole place. All right, I'll check it out. Never even thought about being in Crothersville. I lived in Crothersville at the time, but never thought about being there. I didn't think it was a good business model to be in such a little bitty town like that. Well, anyways, I went and checked the place out. It was a drug house. The people had got evicted, and there was still needles all over the floor. There was dirty diapers everywhere. He was so embarrassed how it was left, he didn't even want me to walk in. And I was like, buddy, I grew up in the ghetto. This ain't nothing, right? I walked to the very back of this house. I said, I'll take it. He said, what? Why? Anyways, I cleaned the whole thing out by myself. I just took trash bags, duct taped them up to my waist, and walked through there and grabbed everything I could and threw them in a dumpster. It was very nasty. It was very dangerous. Found tons and tons of needles in there, and turned it into Beauty from Ashes tattoo. So, yeah.
In my naivety, in my lack of understanding of God, in my, I don't know if we call them prejudices, certainly in my ignorance, I never thought of God creating a tattoo shop.
You're correct, yeah.
I have to admit that to you.
And that's not the first time I've heard that. And you know what was so great about it was we started doing Bible studies shortly after we opened up. And it was slow at first. When we opened up, the day we opened up, we had $67 negative in our bank account. We had no money. We had took every dime we had and just prayed that it would work. But we started doing Bible studies shortly after. And the people that came to these Bible studies would say, I love talking about God. I love learning about God. And I love being in fellowship. But I will never step a foot in a church ever again in my life.
I've heard it before.
And they said, but I'll come to this anytime you're open. And I thought, that's what we're here for. We're here to be something that's an alternative solution, right? And then while I'm sitting there, while the people are getting tattooed, we would end up talking about God because the name of the tattoo shop, well, that's a strange name. Where'd that come from? And it was an immediate, like, okay, well, this is where it came from. Before you know it, we're in there praying for each other in the tattoo booth, you know? And then another thing that came along a couple of years later was, it was a really God thing. It was so remarkable, was I had a lady that knew me from my drug days. She actually let me sleep on her couch a few times before. She was kind of like a mom to me. And she had called me up. She said, hey, is there any spaces available in Crothersville, Indiana that's for rent? I said, well, probably not. There's not a lot here. Well, I just want to find a place where we can do a Celebrate Recovery meeting, and it has to be cheap, and we'll only be there one day a week. I said, well, I have about 500, 600 square foot in my building that's unused. You're more than welcome to use that, and I'm going to charge you a dime. So they started coming in there. The first night, there was 6 of them, including the 2 or 3 people that worked it, right? And they ended up doing so well at the Celebrate Recovery that they had to get official with the Celebrate Recovery national organization, right? So when they did, they had to get authorized by probation in Jackson County. We went to Jackson County and they said, you go ahead and fill out the application, but we're going to tell you right now, you're not in a government building and you're not in a church. There's no way we're going to approve this, but we'll go ahead and send it in for you. A few days later, we go back. They said, God must be on your side because they approved. That's the first tattoo shop that they ever approved in anywhere for Celebrate Recovery. So anyways, they approved this meeting. And before you know it, they were there for about a year. The last meeting they had, there was over 120 people at this meeting. We had the doors open to the building so people could hear the speaker because they had to stand outside. There was no room.
You're talking about 120 in a small area in a town of around 900,000 at the most.
Yes,
probably.
Exactly.
That's equal to 1/10, even more so.
And most of them would
population.
say, I love this meeting. I look forward to coming to this meeting every week. But if it was at a church, I don't know if I would have ever came, you know.
The church has done more to shoot itself in the foot than the world's ever done toward it.
So what's really interesting about that is they were there for about a year because they outgrew the space. They needed more space for their meetings. And there was 2 guys sitting down in one of the last meetings, and they were really well dressed. Now, if you know anything about addiction, you know addiction affects every walk of life. It doesn't matter what you look like, what career you're in, it affects you. So I didn't think nothing about it. Well, then they came over to me. They said, are you the person that's over all this? I said, no. I'm just a tattoo artist. They just do this. They use the space. And he said, well, I wanted to introduce myself. He said, but before I introduce myself, I need to apologize. And I said, apologize for what? What did you break? You know,
his attitude when he came through the door, I'm going to guess.
Yeah. And he said, I'd heard about this recovery meeting for a while, and I kind of looked down on it like, well, why aren't they doing that in a church? That needs to be in a church, you know? And then he said, God really started working on my heart and told me, no, that's what your job was supposed to be. And you didn't do it. And now someone else had to take the light. They had to take that candle and carry it and carry that torch since you weren't. And he said, and that's where I want to apologize, because what you guys are doing here is amazing. What God's doing here is amazing. He said, but this was technically what we should have been doing the whole time. And we just ignored these people because we didn't want the riffraff. We didn't want it in the church. And that's where we were messing up. And he said, I noticed you guys have a space problem here. You don't have a lot of room. He said, I just want to offer that if you guys ever need a space, we've got a whole 400-seat church with a gymnasium. You don't even have to sit in the church part. The gym's separate. It's across the parking lot. It's for those that don't want to really be in a church. So anyways, they ended up taking that opportunity, and it did really well. Did really well for the meeting. And the last meeting they had there, I was actually tattooing a guy because I would tattoo people while the meeting was going on. And some people would book their tattoo just so they could watch the meeting. But anyways, I would tattoo, and they stopped me. They said, "Can you come here and take a break? Just 5 minutes." Okay, all right. So I come over, and they said, "Well, when we became official with Celebrate Recovery, there was one problem that we didn't think about. We had to have an official name for our meeting because there's Celebrate Recoveries everywhere." And they said, so we wanted to name our Celebrate Recovery Beauty from Ashes Celebrate Recovery, because that's just where it started. And I broke down in tears in front of everybody, because I was like, it wasn't because I didn't feel like they were honoring me. I guess for me, that was the first moment that I realized this was God. This was God doing what he was supposed to be doing. And I was just the person that he was using. I was just the donkey he rode in on. You know what I mean?
I got you, pal. I'll tell you what, you've given me so many parallels to the way a Better Life Brianna's Hope has come to be and grown. We're now involved in a jail ministry in Jay County, where we've got one individual who's been there, done that, got all the scars to prove it. Another individual, the one was in prison, the other one's really squared away guy, always has been, but he's got a heart for Christ and a heart for Christ people. We go in there and cut hair. We watch things change there dramatically. They're a part of our organization.
Yeah.
Our Better Life Brianna's Hope began in an abandoned bank building back in 2014.
Nice.
We're now in 44 different chapters, Indiana and Ohio, 1,500 to 1,700 individuals attending. And I always say, you can ask my wife, I'm not smart enough to make this happen.
Yeah.
If it's not God, I don't know what it is.
We did a lot of like different little events that were in there that I was like, right before the event, I was like, this is crazy. I don't know what I was thinking. I can't do this. And I remember God would always nudge me and was like, you're not doing this.
We got to get that through our head somehow.
You're not doing this.
But we have trouble letting go. And sometimes now we're going to change gears for a minute. I love those stories.
Yeah.
I love hearing that progress, that journey. I've got to know about your wife.
Yes.
You share what you want to share. I'll be easy with questions, but I admire her so right now.
So my beautiful wife, she was really the life changer for me. She really changed the whole course of my life. And at that moment, when I met my wife, I was living in a 1-bedroom efficiency apartment. So literally it's one room basically. And I had no furniture. I had a bicycle. I didn't have a refrigerator. I had nothing. And I was only going to be there temporarily. I was going to go back to the neighborhood I grew up in, which probably would have been a bad idea for me. But I was determined I was going back home. So I wasn't looking for any relationship. I'd already had a son from a previous relationship. He was about 9 months old at this time. And I was really depressed because before that moment that I met her, I had lost a lot of stuff in my life to addiction and mental health struggles. I mean, more than once, over and over, I lost everything, but I never lost being with my son. That was the first time that reality hit me, that I have to get it together, because if I want to be a dad, I want to see him, I want to be a part of his life, I've got to get out of this situation. So anyways, I decided I was going to go back to India and move away from all the problems and try to start over. And a buddy of mine came over just to tell me bye, just to say, hey, it was good knowing you, man. Thanks for, having a good friendship. And his girlfriend at the time said, him and Casey would be perfect. And he says, you say that all the time. They've never met. And I'm like, who's Casey? So anyways, they give me her number, or they said they were going to give me her number. And I didn't get her number. Well, then my paycheck got delayed. It got held back a week. They messed up something in the system, and they said they had to mail it. It's going to take 6 to 7 days. And I'm like, I don't want to be here for another week. I want to go back home, So anyways, I go to Walmart to get something, and I run into those guys again. And they said, hey, did you call Casey? Well, you never gave me your number. So anyways, they gave me her number, and I think I started texting her because I don't really like phone calls that much. And she texted me back, and then we went on our first date like 2 days later, I think it was. And we have been together since 16 years is upcoming here in 2 months. It'll be 16 years. We haven't separated since. We went on that first date, and I knew this is going to sound crazy. And I tell people this all the time. I was walking through a bookstore. She's a big bookworm. She loves books. But we were walking through a bookstore, and she walked ahead of me. I was humming this song called Girl with Golden Eyes, and it talks about addiction is what the song's about. Not many people know about it. It's a very rare song. And anyways, as I'm humming it, she finishes singing it, walking past me. And I remember as she walked past me, I thought to myself, I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman. This is who I'm supposed to be with. I know it is. And like I said, we've been together since. But she was a huge instrumental part of my life in changing the person that I wasn't, that I wanted to be. Right.
Yeah, amen.
And her parents, her mom especially, man, she was such a godly woman and was always, she didn't like druggies. She had her own family issues with drugs, so she was really against drugs. And she knew I was into that lifestyle. And this is her 18-year-old daughter. She didn't want her 18-year-old daughter to run off with a druggie, right? But she was so accepting of me. She'll even tell you to this day, it had to have been God, because she would have never dealt with that before, right? But she accepted me. She would bring me to church with her and just show me the love of God. And I remember thinking, if this is what a relationship with God is, I want more of that. And my wife, she's always believed in me. She's always believed in my journey. Anytime I had a crazy idea that I thought there's no way in the world that could ever happen, she's over there like, well, do it then, right? Like, and it's been a struggle, you know, like we've owned our business for 10 years, and being a business owner is hard, especially being a business owner in the last 10 years, right? So she has always been the person that where I'm like, you know what, let's just shut it down. I'm done. And she'd be like, no, that's not how this works. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing this until God tells us something different, you know? And every time that I'm down, she's that one person that can say, hey, get it together. You know, this is reality. So.
What a picture. I love it. Thank you. Her name's Casey,
Casey
right?
McIntosh. Yeah.
Casey, thank you for being that little thorn in the side in a very loving way, okay? Yes. And keeping on with all of this. Now, earlier I told the folks about a little tease. Now we'll give them the please about the art wall. Ooh. I read of it. I think it's incredible. Yes. Go ahead and share that with us, Kyle.
The graffiti art wall, or the free art wall, located in Cudlesville, Indiana, right on the back side of my tattoo studio, View from Ashes Tattoo, was built the first year that we bought that building in 2020. And I'll tell you why. The vision of it was way before that. The vision of this graffiti art wall started at 14 years old. And a judge told me, he asked me when he was sentenced me to do some time for graffiti because I was a habitual offender. I was facing a few years because I got arrested so many times for it. And the judge said, do you have anything to say for yourself? And I said, actually, I do. And my public defender said, oh, don't do it, man. That he's already like, you don't want to do that. I was like, no, I do have something to say. I said, can I ask you something, Your Honor? I said, what if you just kept one of those walls up of the abandoned warehouse, just kept one up and let people do graffiti on it whenever they want, legally? Maybe, just maybe, you would have less illegal graffiti in the neighborhood and it'd be easier to patrol, right? And he looked at me and laughed and he said, it would never work. It's not going to happen. Not while I'm in a courtroom. That will never work. And I said, well, I disagree. He said, well, you can disagree all you want. This is how much time you're about to do. And he was really kind of, rude with me, whatever. But then I walked back and I had to sit in a holding cell for about 2 to 3 hours before I was being transferred to the facility I was going to. So I had a lot of time to think. And I made a promise to myself sitting in that holding cell that's smaller than this room, probably half the size of this room. And I remember the promise I made to myself, if I ever was able to own a piece of property that was publicly accessible, I was going to build a huge wall that anybody could come along and paint on whenever they want, and they couldn't get in trouble for it. And I was going to prove this guy wrong, even if it took everything in me to do it. And yeah, I don't even know how many years later, 25 plus years later, probably, I bought the building that I'm at now. And one of the first things I did was I wanted to build this wall. Now, I am no carpenter by any means. You don't want me to build nothing. It wouldn't be standing there today if I built it. But I was actually tattooing a police officer. And I told him this idea. I told him this story.
This. It's great.
And he was a local police officer for Crothersville. And he said, well, I think this is a great idea. Like, when do you want to do it? I was like, well, I don't have the time to build it, and I can't build nothing, so I'm going to have to figure that part out. He said, well, I own a fencing company, and what you're talking about is the same idea. Basically, just instead of fence, we'll put panels, but we can do it. I was like, well, how much would it cost? You know, because I don't really have a lot of money left after this build. And he goes, well, you buy the lumber, and I'll do the labor for free. I believe in what you're doing, and I think it'd be great for our community. So he did. He tore up the old fence, and then he put in a new wall that's 50 foot long by 8 foot tall. And he built the whole thing himself. He wouldn't let me help him. He let me buy him lunch one time, I think. But he came there on his days off between working his regular job as a police officer, and he owned a fencing company. So he was literally there all times a day just to build this graffiti wall. Now, this graffiti wall is here to this day. People still use it. It changes constantly. This was one of the things, though. When I started this graffiti wall, I meant to get some plastic signs made that said the rules, right? No cussing, no gang signs, no gang related, all that, right? All that stuff. I never got around to doing that, but it's always self-policed itself. I don't ever have problems I've never had any problems with profanity or gang signs or anything. People just automatically respect it. And people come from all over to paint on this wall because we're about a mile away from the interstate. So people will Google where they're at, and it will automatically show there's a graffiti art wall that anybody can come paint on. So they'll just drive over while they're taking a break at the gas station, go paint something on their wall just to say they spray painted on the wall.
Supplies are there on site.
Yes.
Of course, you can bring your own. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the supplies on site. I read about the ladder, the barrels.
Yeah, so there's some barrels out there. There's
those barrels are for.
Sometimes people would use them to stand on, which is probably not the safest idea. But they were also really purposely put there so the traffic wouldn't pull up, or cars wouldn't pull up in the grass right there. But there's also a cabinet that's built into the wall that sometimes, for the most part, usually has paint. Now, this time of year it's cold, so it freezes. But usually there's at least, I'd say, a dozen cans of paint in there. So, but kids from elementary schools, middle schools, they've done field trips just to come paint on the wall. It became a pretty big deal, especially in its first couple of years, because it was not heard of. No one did that.
And I'm going to guess, and I don't mean this rude or crude toward anyone, it's got to be one of the biggest draws in Crothersville to bring anybody in.
It
correct?
Definitely is. And the funny part of it is I thought I was going to get so much lash for it. I thought people were going to really put me on the stake for putting this big old eyesore in their community, right? Like graffiti in a country town, right? But the town has always embraced what we do, and they've always been super supportive. And like I said, they've had schools. The school that's right down the street from us, which is a all level school from elementary up to high school, all in one building. They take a field trip every year to the wall. They walk over there and just spend the day painting.
I'd love to be there that day. My wife was an elementary teacher for 41 years.
Yeah.
They always walked through their community to the fire station, the park, a couple other places. But to be able to see that. And this is a question I'm probably going to be extremely difficult for you to answer. Would you even make a wild guess of how many people have painted on that wall?
That is a tough one.
I'm sure it's hundreds.
Oh, yeah. I would say at least.
Into the thousands.
Yeah, I would say at least hundreds, if not in the thousands. It's changed so much over the year. And what's really great, and I never even asked anybody to do this. I never even made a post that said, hey, this is what we want on the wall. A lot of people put positive messages on the wall. like for other people, like keep going, you're strong, have faith. And it's one of those things that I keep coming back to is like, I didn't know at 14 years old that would actually happen. I wanted it to happen, but I never thought it would become a reality. That's where I think that God was there the whole time. And he was just planting those little seeds in my head like, hey, guess what? This is hard right now, but years from now, this is all going to come full circle.
So do you yourself look at it daily to see changes?
I do, yeah. I admire it just because even the stuff that people would say, oh, that's not the greatest artwork, right? I love it.
It was their greatest.
It was their greatest. And a lot of people express themselves through art. A lot of kids express themselves through art. And yeah, it might look like a stick figure, but you know what? That was a really great stick figure to that kid. And there's nothing to do in Crothersville. So,
All right. So can you recall a favorite painting that somebody put on there? Is there one that sticks out in your mind because it just grabbed you when you walked by? I'm sure that's happened several times. But is there a couple in particular?
Yeah, there's been a few times where there was just some really amazing graffiti artists that came up from like Louisville and Cincinnati just to do this wall. Just regular graffiti, but it was just really detailed. But there was one time that said hope, faith, and love, and it was as big as the wall, and it had to take them all day to do it, and it was pretty detailed, and it sat on there, oh my gosh, for probably a month and a half, and no one would touch that side of the wall. They would do everything on the other side. It would change every day on the other side, but that one side wouldn't change.
They were just enamored with it as well and didn't want to see it.
Yeah, it's like they respected
layer under.
Yeah.
There is a town not far from here called Alexandria. This is a weak parallel, but they have the largest paintball in the world.
Really?
It started with a baseball hanging down.
Oh, yes.
Somebody brushing the baseball. And I don't know how many thousands of coats of paint it has on it now.
Wow.
It's just a little bit west of Alexandria and a little bit, I guess it'd be south. In a building there, they've had to reinforce things to hold it up there.
Right.
But it's humongous. There's no way I could show you the size.
That's
it's
incredible.
Much more than that. But the wife and I went there once. We've got our coat of paint on there. They give you a certificate at that time.
Oh, that's cool.
That tells you this is coat whatever.
Yeah.
And it's in the Guinness World Book of Records, Indiana oddities, all kinds of things of that nature.
Randy, I looked it up. It now weighs 11,600 pounds and has 30,000 coats on it.
What?
Started with a baseball.
That's so crazy.
It's this big around to the size of a garage door, probably.
That's absolutely crazy.
And I can see that with yours. Yeah. Do you have a guest register book that you have out there in season?
So we don't yet, but that's something that has came up a lot. A lot of people have said, hey, it is on Google. And last time I knew it was on Google. I haven't really kept up with it for a long time.
Sure.
But, but a lot of people will come into the shop and is it okay if we paint on this wall? We heard it was okay, but we just want to make sure. Yeah, go
appreciate that respect.
Yeah. And they really get like surprised when I'm like, hold on, and I'll give them like a whole like milk crate full of spray paint, and they're like, are you sure? Like, yeah, just don't spray paint each other's face or like cars
or your
or
car.
anything.
Yeah.
But I have murals on the side of my building too that I done. One's an anatomical heart that I did for Overdose Awareness Day a few years ago. It's on the back of my building, and then on the other side of my building is a Mother Teresa mural that's about 2 stories tall. No one's ever touched my building with spray paint. They never touched the cars. They only touched the wall. So.
RESPECT, as Aretha Franklin used to say. Okay. Yes. Wow. Kyle, we're starting to run out of time here. I want to give you a chance to wrap it up in any way you'd like to. Just final words of encouragement or thanks, praise, whatever. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so The reason why I wanted to do this podcast with you guys, when you guys had asked me to come along, and other podcasts that I've been on before, and just speaking on stage and such, is not to glorify anything that I've done. It is to glorify God and what he moves in people's lives and how he can move so differently in each and every person's life. God knew the only way he was going to connect to me was through art. That's my language, and he knew my language, so he spoke my language. But I also know there's so many people out there that are really similar to me. They only speak through art, or maybe they speak through different things like music, writing, whatever types of art that is, but they feel alone. You are not alone. I felt alone for 20 years of my life, 20 plus years of my life. And then I realized I wasn't. And now I want people to understand that if you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with anxiety, you're dealing with addiction, whatever the issue is, I promise you, just in your own time, in your own meaning, just have that conversation with God. And just, you don't have to say a fancy prayer. You don't have to read it right out of the word. You can literally say it in your own language, right? Like art was my language, and asking God into my heart. That's how he received to me. That's how he came to me. So wherever you're at in your life, it doesn't matter. God does not care where you're at. He wants to know where you're going to be. That's what he wants to know. And if you're dealing with those problems, guys, just reach out to God. That's the first person you reach out to, because I promise you, if you don't believe in God, I was one of those people too. I didn't know what God was until I found God. And if you don't believe it, I'm sitting here right in front of you because of it. I promise you that. There's no other reason other than God.
Amen. Kyle, thank you so much for your time, your witness, your testimony, transparency, everything you've shared with us. You're going to see me in Caruthersville one of these days.
Out there painting on the wall.
Yeah, I'll be out there painting on the wall. No painting skills, but I know how to use a spray paint can, okay?
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, so God bless, and your ministry and all that you do, those that you're reaching out to, and those that you're going to touch. Thanks. Once again, folks, we want to remind you, as we always do, those 4 words: stay in the battle. It's going to come your way. God's going to see to it. Challenge him to, okay? To ask him, if you're real, do this. And stand back, get ready to be involved. Yes. It's going to happen. Amen. We love you. Join us again. God bless.
Thank you.